I was 58 when my daughter put me in a nursing home and sold the house where I had lived for 31 years. And although she kept calling the place assisted living, as if a softer phrase could change what had happened, the building still smelled like bleach, boiled vegetables, and people trying not to admit that somebody had decided their lives were easier to manage from a distance. Lauren said the move was temporary because I had fractured my hip in the garage, spent 6 days in the hospital, and needed rehabilitation, while the house had too many stairs and she could not keep driving across town whenever I missed a pill, which all sounded reasonable while I was medicated, tired, ashamed that nurses had to help me dress, and grateful that my daughter arrived every morning with coffee, spoke to doctors like she ran the building, and told everyone she would handle the paperwork so I could focus on getting strong again. I had raised Lauren alone after her mother died when she was 14, which meant I packed terrible lunches, learned to braid hair from a video, sat through school concerts after 12-hour workdays, signed permission slips at red lights, and kept the mortgage paid because grief does not pause bills, so when she grew into a sharp, organized woman who could make older men listen without raising her voice, I felt proud rather than cautious, and never imagined those same skills would one day be used to remove me from my own home while calling it care. Her husband, Nathan, worked for Harrow Industrial Systems, and most people assumed the company belonged to him because he was president, appeared in trade magazines, spoke at conferences, and had his photograph on the website beside articles about leadership, while Lauren called it Nathan's company often enough that I eventually stopped correcting her because the distinction seemed harmless at family dinners. It was not Nathan's company because I owned 64% through a holding company managed by my attorney and an outside accountant, while Nathan held a salaried executive job that gave him influence, status, and access to a life he enjoyed, but no right to treat my shares as decoration or my silence as surrender. Harrow made custom metal assemblies for hospitals, food plants, and warehouses, and I had invested 17 years earlier when the founder needed cash after a lawsuit and a failed expansion, after which I guaranteed a credit line, replaced 2 managers, bought shares from retiring partners, and gradually became the controlling owner without ever feeling the need to put my face on the website or introduce myself as the man who kept the lights on. Nathan joined 9 years ago after Lauren asked me to help him following a job loss, and because he was polished, intelligent, good with clients, and willing to work hard when people were watching, he rose from sales director to president with my support, which I gave because I wanted to believe helping my son-in-law would strengthen the family rather than teach him that family connections could replace limits. President was a job while ownership remained a fact. But Lauren never cared about the distinction because whenever I explained voting rights, board authority, or the structure of the holding company, she said business details gave her a headache, and Nathan understood that world better than she ever would. 2 years before my fall, after a friend had a stroke and left bills unpaid for months, Lauren started asking about my will, insurance, and bank accounts. So Martin, the attorney who had represented me for almost 20 years, prepared a limited financial power of attorney, allowing her to pay bills if I became unable to do so, but forbidding her from changing my trust, transferring business interests, or selling real estate unless 2 physicians declared me incapacitated. That document should have protected me, but during rehabilitation, a facility doctor tested me at 7 in the morning after I had barely slept, and while pain medication made me slow, then recorded impaired judgment, because I missed the date by 1 day and forgot 3 words, after which Lauren obtained a second opinion from a neurologist who never examined me in person but reviewed the chart, spoke with her by video, and signed a letter saying I was likely unable to manage complex finances. I knew none of this while it happened because Lauren brought papers to my room, said they covered insurance, temporary care, and permission to speak with the bank, then kissed my forehead when I asked why there were so many signature tabs and told me not to exhaust myself trying to read legal language while recovering. I signed 4 places, and a week later she drove me to Green Meadows Senior Living where my clothes were already hanging in a narrow room. Family photographs sat on the dresser. My slippers waited beside the bed, and someone had placed a framed picture of Lauren and the children on the nightstand, which meant the lie had been planned carefully enough to look like comfort before I even understood that I had been moved. For the first week, I believed the bathroom at home was being renovated. During the second week, I started asking for a return date. And by the third week, Lauren stopped giving dates at all, while every conversation became a soft lecture about safety, stress, how much better I seemed now that trained people could watch me, and how selfish it would be to make the family worry when a professional facility had already solved the problem. Nathan visited once with a fruit basket carrying a Harrow card, stood near the window while checking his phone, and told me not to worry because the company was doing better than ever, and Lauren was handling the house, which sounded ordinary until I asked what handling meant and saw him look at her before she calmly explained that they had accepted an offer. At first, I thought I had misunderstood, but she repeated that the house cost too much to maintain, the market was strong, and the proceeds would pay for years of excellent care, while I tried to understand how she could discuss selling the rooms where her mother had lived, where Lauren had done homework at the kitchen table, and where I had spent 3 decades building a life, as if she were comparing insurance plans. I told her the house was not for sale, and she answered that the contract had already been signed under the power of attorney, then explained with calm embarrassment that the buyers had sold their own home. Canceling would create legal problems, and I had agreed in the hospital, even though no such conversation had taken place. I tried to stand, nearly fell, and told them both to leave, but the next 2 days showed me the sale was only part of the plan, because my mobile phone had disappeared. Martin did not return calls from the room phone, and staff refused me the office computer because my file said I required supervised communication regarding finances. That restriction frightened me more than the house sale, since I was not simply recovering in a place I disliked, but had been turned into a documented version of myself whose objections could be dismissed as symptoms, whose anger could be called confusion, and whose requests required approval from the same person benefiting from his silence. When I asked to leave, the administrator said my medical representative had to approve a safe discharge plan, and when I requested my records, she said the request had to go through Lauren, so I began recording dates, staff, medications, meals, and conversations in a spiral notebook while balancing imaginary checkbooks, listing the tenants in my commercial buildings, and writing down every board member at Harrow, because I needed proof that my mind had not disappeared simply because other people found it convenient to say it had. A night nurse named Denise noticed me copying medication labels and checked my chart, where she found that a sedating anti-anxiety drug had been added after Lauren reported agitation and nighttime confusion, although what she called confusion was me demanding access to my lawyer and asking when I could go home. So Denise quietly asked whether I wanted to refuse it, and my head felt clearer the next morning. 3 days later, Denise let me use her personal phone, and I called Martin's private number from memory, after which he answered on the second ring and told me his office had never received my messages, but had received an email from my address stating that I was moving all legal matters to another firm 2 weeks after my fall. I had sent no such email. Martin asked 5 questions only we would know, then told me not to confront Lauren again because he needed time to understand what she and Nathan had done without giving them a reason to destroy records. And the next afternoon he arrived carrying a novel and sugar-free candy so the staff would believe he was an old family friend rather than the attorney about to pull apart the structure built around me. We sat in the courtyard while I told him everything, and he explained that the house had closed 4 days earlier for $840,000, leaving just over $600,000 after the mortgage and costs, with the money placed in a new account under my name, but controlled by Lauren. Then he told me that 2 commercial properties had also been transferred into a management company owned by Lauren and Nathan, not sold, but placed under their control, so the rent would flow through them, with both deeds recorded while I was in rehabilitation and no payment made to me. I asked about Harrow before he could continue, and Martin said my shares were safe because the holding agreement prohibited transfers under any power of attorney, meaning only I, or a court-appointed guardian approved by the board, could vote or sell them, while neither Lauren nor Nathan had asked for those documents because they apparently assumed the company was already his in every way that mattered. That was when I understood they believed I was finished, since they had taken the visible house, redirected the rental income, and placed me somewhere they expected medication, paperwork, and time to do the rest, without realizing that the company funding their entire life still answered to me. I did not want to fire Nathan in anger, because he would challenge the decision as proof that I was confused and vindictive. So Martin arranged an independent evaluation with a geriatric psychiatrist. Denise documented that I refused the sedative and remained calm, and my therapist confirmed I could walk with a cane, follow instructions, and handle ordinary daily tasks. The psychiatrist spent 2 hours testing my memory, reasoning, judgment, and financial understanding, then asked me to explain the difference between revenue and cash flow, and when I told him that question would disqualify half the executives I knew, he smiled before issuing a report finding no dementia and stating that I had full legal and financial capacity. Martin filed an emergency petition challenging the incapacity letters and Lauren's use of the power, notified the title insurer, froze the account holding the house proceeds, and recorded notices against the commercial properties, while I kept eating bland dinners at Green Meadows and saying nothing because silence finally belonged to me. Harrow had 5 board seats, 3 of which I controlled through my shares, while Nathan occupied 1 as president, and the 5th belonged to Evelyn Cho, an investor who cared more about governance than family feelings. So Martin scheduled a special meeting to review unauthorized use of company resources, executive conflicts, and misrepresentations involving the controlling shareholder. Nathan received the notice on Monday morning and called Green Meadows 6 times before lunch, but I did not answer, which brought Lauren to my room at 2, wearing the navy coat she used for serious meetings, carrying the notice in one hand, and speaking to me for the first time as an opponent rather than a patient. She asked what I thought I was doing, and I told her I was reviewing the management of my company, after which she said Harrow was Nathan's company, with such certainty that I almost felt sorry for her, before explaining the shares, the holding company, the voting rights, and the board appointments she had ignored because those details once bored her. When I asked where my $600,000 was, she said the money was being protected for my care, and when I asked why my buildings had been transferred into a company she owned, she called it simplified management, while the false email to Martin became something I had supposedly requested because I wanted a fresh start, with every answer arriving too quickly to be spontaneous. I told her the accounts were frozen, the deeds were being challenged, and an independent doctor had confirmed my capacity, after which her expression changed from practiced concern to fear so quickly that I knew guilt had never been the strongest emotion in the room. She sat beside the bed and said she had been overwhelmed by work. The children, my recovery, Nathan's stress, and a pregnancy she had not announced because she wanted to wait until the first trimester had passed, claiming that every decision had been made to keep the family stable before another baby arrived. That was how I learned she was pregnant, and for 1 second I forgot the house, the money, the forged email, and the company, because all I could see was Lauren at 14 holding her mother's hand in a hospital room, while somewhere inside the daughter who had trapped me, there was another child I might still get to love. Then I asked why stability required hiding my phone, restricting my calls, and selling my house without telling me, and she blamed the facility, which later denied receiving such instructions from anyone except her. Lauren left accusing me of destroying my grandchildren's security, and that almost worked, because guilt had always been the lever she could reach after years when I gave money before she finished asking, created Nathan's job, and called their down payment an early inheritance because saying no felt less loving than solving the problem. The board meeting took place 3 days later by secure video, with me wearing a suit Martin brought from storage, while Nathan joined from Harrow's conference room, looking irritated rather than afraid, apparently expecting to express concern about my health, explain away the paperwork, and return to work. Evelyn asked whether he knew Lauren had sold my home under a disputed incapacity finding, and Nathan called it a family matter, until Martin showed emails directing company payments into Lauren's management firm, records proving Harrow employees prepared lease documents, and a request that the controller describe me to a bank as permanently incapacitated. Nathan first called it temporary bookkeeping, then blamed Lauren, then said he trusted his wife and assumed I had approved everything before my fall, although the dates made that impossible. And when I asked why he had never called me if he truly believed I approved the transfers, he said he did not want to interfere with my recovery. That was when Evelyn voted against him. The board placed Nathan on immediate leave, suspended his access, and opened an outside investigation, which confirmed 2 weeks later that he had diverted payments, misused staff, and participated in preparing documents designed to make my loss of control appear legitimate. So we terminated him for cause and removed the unvested options, bonus, company car, and executive benefits he had treated as permanent parts of his identity. The public statement mentioned only a leadership change after an internal governance review because I needed control restored rather than public humiliation. Although Lauren still called me cruel and said Nathan would never find another executive job, their mortgage depended on his income, the children might have to leave their school, and the stress was dangerous for the pregnancy. I told her those were consequences rather than emergencies, but the sentence no longer felt clean after I knew about the baby, because every hard decision now seemed to reach beyond the two adults who had planned my removal and into the life of someone who had not chosen any part of it. At the capacity hearing, after I answered questions for nearly 2 hours while Lauren's attorney portrayed my refusal to remain at Green Meadows as reckless, Martin introduced the independent evaluation, nursing notes, medication records, false email, and property transfers, leading the judge to end Lauren's authority, order a full accounting, appoint an independent fiduciary, and refer the records for investigation. The house was harder because the buyers had acted in good faith, paid market value, moved in, and had no reason to know Lauren's authority was disputed. So although I could have spent years trying to reverse the sale and hurt people who had done nothing wrong, I chose to let them keep it. That hurt more than winning anything else helped. When I returned once to collect a box found in the attic, a stranger opened my front door. The hallway had been painted pale green, my wife's mirror was gone, and a child's shoes rested beside the stairs, making the house look alive without me in a way that felt both comforting and brutal, because no court order could restore the years stored in those rooms. I sued for the money instead, and the court returned the remaining sale proceeds to my trust, while Lauren and Nathan, who had already spent nearly $90,000 on debts, legal fees, and a deposit on a vacation property, received a judgment requiring repayment, with the commercial transfers reversed because their company had paid nothing and the deeds violated the power of attorney. My grandchildren were what kept me awake because they knew only that Grandpa made Dad lose his job and Mom cry while Lauren blocked my number on their tablets and returned gifts. So I wrote letters, kept copies, and placed birthday money into education accounts she could not touch instead of using money to pressure her. Then, during the ugliest month of the case, Lauren miscarried near 12 weeks. Nobody could tell me what caused it, because her doctor said early pregnancy loss is common and often has no single explanation. But Lauren told me the stress had done it, Nathan told other people the lawsuits had done it, and I began carrying a question no court could answer. I had restored my rights, stopped the theft, protected the company, and prevented them from using my age as a legal eraser. Yet somewhere inside the same chain of consequences was a child I would never hold. I did not know whether guilt made the connection feel more certain than medicine ever could, but I knew Lauren believed the baby had been lost while her life was collapsing, and I knew I would spend years wondering whether justice had arrived with a cost I had not understood when I set everything in motion. For several nights I replayed the week before the board meeting and asked myself what might have happened if I had waited, warned them privately, removed Nathan without freezing the accounts, or delayed the court filing until Lauren reached the second trimester, even though another part of me knew waiting could have given them time to move money, destroy records, or make my confinement permanent. That was the cruelty of the question, because every alternative required me to pretend I had possessed information I did not have when the decisions were made, while guilt kept rewriting the past as if I had stood at a clean crossroads and deliberately chosen the road that ended with a dead child. Once my rights were restored, I left Green Meadows and rented a one-story house near my therapist, where the bedroom window faced east instead of west, and confused me for weeks, while Denise later brought the notebook I had forgotten and showed me the page where I had written that I was not dead, and confusion was not consent. Lauren was charged with financial exploitation and falsifying records, then accepted a plea that avoided jail if she returned funds, completed probation, and never served as anyone's fiduciary again, while Nathan avoided charges over the house because he had signed nothing but still had to repay diverted corporate money and legal costs over 7 years. Their marriage did not survive the pressure because Nathan eventually claimed in court that Lauren had acted alone, and once consequences arrived, the husband she had protected stepped behind her, leaving them divorced 18 months after I left Green Meadows. Lauren contacted me after the divorce and asked to meet at a coffee shop, where she looked older despite only 2 years having passed, did not hug me, and apologized first for selling the house rather than for the false medical story, the hidden phone, or the nursing home. She admitted Nathan had convinced her that I would eventually need full-time care, and that establishing my incapacity was the safest way to stop me from finding the diverted payments, while the neurologist relied mostly on her account and the missing phone. Restricted calls and false email were all deliberate. Then she said she had believed some of it too, because she watched me age, watched me fall, and let fear turn control into something she could call care, which mattered because Nathan had pushed, but she still chose each step and signed her own name to the decisions. She also said she still believed stress had taken the baby, then immediately admitted no doctor could prove it, which left the accusation between us without becoming a fact either of us could challenge. I wanted to defend myself by listing every choice she and Nathan had made, every chance they had to stop, and every day they had left me in a place where my own calls required permission, but none of those facts could create the grandchild whose ultrasound picture she kept folded inside her wallet. I told her I could forgive fear, but could not forgive planning my disappearance while I was still speaking. And although we did not repair everything that day, she slowly began bringing the children to lunch once a month, with the first visits feeling stiff enough that every fork against a plate sounded loud. The miscarriage stayed in the room even when nobody mentioned it, because Lauren would sometimes watch the children play and press her lips together, while I found myself calculating how old the baby would have been at Christmas, at the start of school, or on the afternoon when Lauren finally laughed at one of my old jokes again. Lauren and I speak now, although trust moves slowly, and she does not have a key to my house, access to my accounts, or authority over my medical care, because those roles belong to Martin's firm and an independent care manager, and when she asked whether that meant I would never trust her again, I told her I would never again ask trust to do the work of safeguards. Harrow remains profitable, Evelyn became board chair, and we hired a president with no family connection to me while I attend quarterly meetings, sold part of my stake to an employee trust, and used recovered money to buy a smaller home where my wife's old dining table fits tightly but still belongs to me. Lauren cried when she saw that table because her mother had chosen it, and after she left I sat alone with one hand on the worn edge and wondered how many generations a piece of furniture could hold when one of those generations had never been born. People focus on the board meeting because they like imagining the moment Lauren realized I owned Nathan's company and the old man in the nursing home finally destroyed the people who put him there. But the real story is about concern turning into control when money is nearby. A daughter convincing herself she was protecting her father while removing every way he could object. And a husband confusing an executive title with ownership and family loyalty with immunity. It is also about me because I gave Lauren access when saying no felt unloving, gave Nathan authority because questioning him created tension at dinner, and solved their problems with money until they began treating my assets as part of their lives, which explains why I left the doors open, even though it does not excuse what they did. I know I was right to stop them because the alternative was allowing my daughter and her husband to erase me legally, financially, and physically while I was still alive. Yet being right has never stopped me from wondering what would have happened if I had chosen a quieter strategy, waited one more week, or protected the company without making their lives collapse all at once. Maybe the miscarriage would have happened anyway because the doctor said there was no way to know, but uncertainty is not mercy. And every time I see a baby in a grocery cart, hear Lauren mention the child, and then fall silent, or pass the empty chair at family dinner, I feel the space where another grandchild might have existed. There are mornings when I wake in the smaller house and feel certain I did the only sane thing, because the documents were real, the theft was real, and the plan to silence me was deliberate. Yet by evening, that certainty becomes harder to hold after Lauren sends a photograph of my living grandchildren, or I remember the ultrasound image folded in her wallet. Martin says I should stop treating myself like the cause of it all, while my therapist says guilt borrows the shape of responsibility because responsibility feels easier than accepting that some losses have no person to blame. But neither thought stays with me when I picture the grandchild whose face none of us ever saw. I know I did not cause that loss with my hands, and Lauren cannot prove stress caused it, yet knowledge and peace are not the same thing. Getting older does not make you property. Needing help does not erase ownership of your home, money, choices, anger, or dignity, and confusion during pain, medication, or recovery should never be treated as consent to disappear. But justice does not always arrive cleanly, because sometimes it restores what was stolen while leaving you with something else that can never be returned. My daughter placed me in a nursing home and sold my house because she believed I had become too weak to stop her, while she and Nathan forgot that I still controlled the company paying for their life. I stopped them, recovered my rights, and proved that I was still here. But I also know there is one grandchild I will never meet, and I still do not know whether winning was the same thing as doing the right thing.